Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show. Today's a little different. As you can see, I'm in front of my whiteboard, which isn't really a whiteboard. It's a glass board that I draw on. And I was just doing a class right here, and then I said, get me the AI notes from my flash talks. I do these flash talks with Gene Bailey, and we're on the road with Flashpoint. And I love them because they're an energetic group. And I'm looking at the flash talks I've got here, but the notes are hilarious. I have to read to you what artificial intelligence thinks I'm talking about. It says here, Lance believes he has an unfulfilled prophetic purpose and will be brought before Caesar in Rome. Obviously, I'm talking about an unfulfilled prophetic purpose and how Paul had to be brought before Caesar in Rome. This is what I love the most. Lance talks about the centurion on board the ship along with the pharmaceutical representatives. I can't wait to see exactly what I said that AI thought I'm talking about the pharmaceutical. I think I'm talking about Pharisees, not pharmaceuticals. Anyway, in an age when there's a lot, when AI is like this, you're going to have to go back to ancient principles. The Bible says something in the midst of shaking. The prophet Haggai said, the silver is mine and the gold is mine. That's why I keep telling people, whatever's happening in the United States right now, you need to take a look at lancewallnau.com/gold. Go look at our basic report, our fundamental report, 20 pages on why gold and silver and precious metals is a great, stable store of value, and markets are fluctuating and there's all kinds of disruption. I'm saying that gold has been going up for the last year for a reason, because people don't trust the economy. They don't trust the future. They think America's on the wrong track. But all the banks globally buying up the gold. Why? There's stability there. Go to lancewallnau.com/gold and read the report and understand why it's important for you to be thinking about that same strategy. Now let's get into today's Flashpoint, which I guarantee doesn't have pharmaceuticals on board Paul's ship to Rome.
All right, would you please welcome one of my best friends in the world? Just don't tell him. Lance Wallnau.
Hello, hello. Thank you, thank you. Yes, Gene and I we've been building a relationship over the years, from our early days of his abuse. Well, this is an interesting podium to work from. And I'd like to share with you how to get a good sermon. All right, so for those of you that are online that won't be here tomorrow for our secret meeting, you see what we do in Flashpoint on the road is we have secret meetings. And I am speaking at the secret meeting tomorrow, which isn't broadcast. But I'm going to tell you the point of the secret meeting tomorrow. Watch the fan turn the pages. All right, if you've got a Bible, this will be brief, but I don't want you to miss this. Acts 27. How many of you really sense that America is a prodigal nation? Now, how did the prodigal son, your prodigal children, the prodigals you're praying for? Here's the funny thing. I remember a preacher told me once, when you're praying for your prodigal husband, prodigal son, prodigal whatever, the temptation is to intervene, to get them out of their misery. But he said something I'll never forget. He said, don't fix the fix that God fixed to fix them. In other words, if someone's in a fix or a difficult place, don't fix it. How many of you ever bailed someone out only to have them go back in again and again and again? And the Lord finally says, stop. Why? Because there's a certain education that comes from the consequences of bad choices. And America has spent $35 trillion in order to keep itself from experiencing the consequences of stupid policies and ideas. At some point, we'll go broke as a nation, not a negative confession, and economic calculus. At some point, you run out of money. Or 30 or 40 nations get together and decide they're not going to accept your dollar anymore because they think you're fiscally irresponsible and your house is on fire. That's where America's at right now. Here's what I want to tell you. The prodigal nation, like a prodigal son, can only come to itself when it's experienced enough reality therapy that it realizes it needs to change. You've got to toughen up, church, because you're on board the ship, whether they like it or not. They don't know who we are. They put movies out on us. They call us Christian nationalists, terms that we never use, by the way. They put on us. They have all kinds of paranoia about what we represent. But still, their deliverance is the fact that we're on board this ship. And the proof of that is a great story, and it's in the book of Acts, where the Apostle Paul is stuck on board a ship. And what I want to do right now is I want to talk to you about how to connect your life, your giving, your offering of yourself to the Lord so that it brings deliverance to you and your family. That's what we've got to learn. Paul was on board a ship he didn't want to be on. He told them to make better decisions. They overruled his decisions. He knew what they needed to do, but they didn't want to listen to it because there was a fanatical rabbi in the basement, and he was on his way to Rome for a trial anyway. They had a brand on him. He didn't have any equity on board that ship. However, when the cargo got lost and they got caught in the storm and they feared for their own lives, they remembered the fanatic that told them they should have stayed in the port, because if they took off and didn't do what he said, they could possibly experience the loss of life. And sure enough, Paul, in this one great verse, a pivotal verse that I pray happens in America and happens in every home, Acts 27:24, an angel comes and answers Paul's intercession, his apostolic travail on board that crazy ship. And the angel breaks through and says, "Fear not, Paul, you must be brought before Caesar. And lo, God has given to you all them that are now sailing with you." What an interesting shift. The moment the angel came on board, it was as though God said, up until now, you were a hostage on their nutty ship. From now on, they're a hostage on board your destiny. You've got to go to Rome, so God's going to save them. Let me tell you something. The secret sauce for saving America is the unfinished assignment of Christians in America. God will save this ship because your work isn't done in the earth. Let me say that again. That ship would have gone down and just been a footnote in some Wikipedia article, except that Paul had a prophetic word that his face was in the future in Rome. One time I was at a meeting where Kim Clement and I were about to go, great prophet of God. We were going to Detroit, and we're on our way to Detroit. And just a week before we got there, we were going to be introducing prophetic ministry. The pastor wanted prophetic ministry to the church. He was breaking the church open to understand the prophets are real. And a woman who had been instrumental in opening the door of the church to the prophetic message, she died 2 weeks before the prophetic conference started. Ooh, that's not a great way to start your prophetic church. So the senior pastor called up and said, "How do I explain this?" Well, one of the prophets went there. I think it was Bill Hammond was there the first week, and Kim Clement and I were there the second week. And he said, "I understand Sister so-and-so just passed away. She prayed for 30 years for this church to be opened up to the prophetic. I'm going to tell you something. I took a look at her prophecies. She actually kept them and prayed according to the prophecies. And her testimony was that over 40 years of faithfully serving God, not one prophetic word failed to be fulfilled in her life." And he made this conclusion. He said, when all of your prophetic expectations have been met, it probably means your assignment is up. In other words, thank God for the promises you've got that haven't been fulfilled yet. Thank God for the frustrating promises and prophecies that are looming over your head that you wonder if they're ever going to happen. Those are your invitation to Rome in the middle of a shipwreck. Here's my message to you. You're carrying your future on the inside of you. How many of you would like to release the authorization of heaven to make sure your face makes it all the way to Rome? Well, some of you got that. Let me say it again. I found something out. My little Jewish background, you know, I've got an Ashkenazi Jewish heritage. I did a DNA test. I heard about my father was a long line of rabbis on my father's side. My dad was a bit of an irreverent fellow. He broke from the tradition. And I couldn't believe that I had a Jewish background. I looked it up, and sure enough, I've got family in Israel, and it's rabbis of all things, Levites. So I took an interest in the Jewish part of my DNA, and it took me to the book of Hebrews, and I found something out. It says something interesting here. It says that when Abraham went to war, that he went up against 5 kings that had taken his nephew hostage. You are at war for your family's sake. When I think about it, I'm not that politically passionate. I mean, I care about issues, but you want to really know what keeps me out at my retirement age, risking my life and making new enemies every day? What keeps me motivated is my children and now my grandchildren. Because I've had a good life, and I cannot stand cowardice in my own life when I pull back from the conflict so that they have to face the demons I refuse to slay. Abraham went to war for the sake of his nephew. If you're like Abraham, then you're going to do this thing you've got to do in America for the sake of the family. Now, Abraham, after he takes on those 5 kings, has a sober mourning. He took them on and beat them. But the next day, it was the realization, oh my gosh, have I made powerful enemies? You are making powerful enemies in America, by the way. And that was when he had God show up for him and reveal himself as his shield and his protection. That was when he met Melchizedek. In Hebrews chapter 7, this strange character suddenly steps out. He's only mentioned twice in the Bible. He steps out in history. You find out that after Abraham had accomplished his defeat of 5 kings, he's nervous about how he, with 318 people, is going to possibly deal with retribution once they get organized. He did a night raid. This is when he runs into Melchizedek. The Bible kind of clearly says this is a priest, an unusual priest. He was a king and a priest. He was both a ruler and a priest, a strange alchemy. And he has no lineage. He had no beginning, had no end, and that's why many theologians believe this isn't Seth or one of the sons of Noah. This was a theophany, or what you could say is one of the rare appearances of Jesus showing up in the Old Testament. Why would that be the case? He meets Abraham, and he blesses Abraham, the friend of God, the man closest to God on the earth, and the Bible says clearly the greater blesses the lesser. So whoever this guy was, he was greater than Abraham, the friend of God, and Abraham gives him an offering. Why would Abraham give him an offering? Because the Jewish people, before tithing was written into our law by Moses, they had the sense to know, I'm going to connect something I've got of value with something I see of value. I will take what is important to me and invest it in that which is divine. He recognized in Melchizedek a king and a priest, someone who represented the God that he was submitted to, and so he gives him a tithe of his combat, 10%. Turns the rest of it over to the king of Sodom. He didn't want to touch any of it, lest anyone say that anyone other than God made him wealthy. But he gave 1/10 of the spoils to Melchizedek. And I read this, and here's the promise I want to give you. The Bible says in Hebrews that Abraham, this writer says, when he was giving this tithe to Melchizedek, Levi, his descendant, was in his loins. Levi was in the loins of Abraham when he made the offering. I'm going to tell you something. There are times when God calls people of faith to give an offering because what they're carrying will be birthed because of their obedience. Let me say it again. There are times when the future you're carrying, the Levi that's in your loins, not just the next generation, it was Isaac, it was Jacob's son. We're going down, the generational future of Abraham was in his loins, and he connected his offering to his future. America needs believers who have the hardiness to say, we're going to stay on board the ship, not wig out, freak out, or break down, or backslide. We're going to stay in position because we have an unfinished assignment. This gospel of the kingdom shall be taken into all the world and preached, and then shall the end come. And the United States is still, to this day, the greatest, most powerful missionary, electronic, televised, financial support of the global work of the church. You've got more nations praying for America's election than you have evangelicals praying for it. Because the world knows what's happening in America will affect them. So I expect divine intervention, but here's what I'm telling you. Your future, your face is in Rome, like Paul's. The shipwreck can be averted. The disaster can be overruled. A nation of bad decisions who deserve a shipwreck can be saved because of your unfinished assignment. But there are times when you and I have to recognize, how in the world do I connect with my unmanifest future? How do I connect with that which I'm carrying so that it doesn't sink in a shipwreck, but it actually shows up? And we find out in the Bible, Abraham, when he gave the offering to God, was connecting his future with what he was giving. Hey, let's take a moment right here and talk about something. You know, these programs are actually paid for by sponsors. And so the one thing that I always do is try to pick the sponsors that have the greatest value. Those are the ones that I myself believe in. Now, the Birch Gold Group is one of those key sponsors, and I'll tell you why. The economy is the area that I'm the most concerned about in terms of instability in the future. Do you know that right now, China and Russia and India is meeting with Saudi Arabians and South Africans to create an alternative economy, to basically crush the dollar? This is going to have a massive effect on the stock market, on real estate. It'll be a real shaking. But you don't have to be shaken, because there's a way you can protect your retirement, your 401ks, your IRAs, by connecting them in with gold. Gold is unique in history in that it's a place of stored value. In fact, those BRICS nations of Brazil and Russia, India and China, they're going to be backing themselves with, guess what? Gold. So be smart. I want you to go to lancewallnau.com/birch and get a free information kit. Get knowledge, act quickly, don't wait. And they're going to be able to help you make a great decision on what to do. Remember, that information is free with no strings attached. Do it now, lancewallnau.com/birch.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.